Hello everybody, this is the 7th video in the Richard Laymon novel review series and the 3rd video in the Beast House Chronicles. Today I'm going to be talking about I guess you could call it the final book in the Beast House trilogy. There was a novella which came after this, but it really acts as a kind of a coda to the series rather than a book in its own right. This is the Midnight Tour, published in 1998. It's his longest novel. He does have a book which has more pages than this, but because of the size of the print, this one is certainly the longest book he ever wrote. It comes in at 538 pages, which for him is very long. And it was published in 1998, which is the end of his writing career. He died in 2001. And before this, he was on a run of substandard novels, in my opinion, and I was very interested to know if he still had it in him to write a great book at this point in his career, because I really do think in the late 90s he was beginning to run out of ideas a little bit, and it wasn't a good sign to me at the time when this was published. It wasn't a good sign that he had returned to the Beast House series 12 years after the previous book. It kind of felt a bit like he knew he was out of ideas, so he thought, all right, I'll play it safe and do a book about a series which has been popular in the past. So I was a bit worried going into this one, because The Cellar and The Beast House, the previous two books, were such important books to me. I really wanted this one to be good. Is it good? Let's see. Firstly, though, let me do what I usually do. There's the cover art, some of my favourite cover art on one of his books, the spine, and on the back here, the synopsis, it says, "The Beast House, legendary site of ghastly murder. See with your own eyes where the bloody butchery took place." The sales pitch hasn't changed much over the years, except now you can listen to it on earphones. But the audio tour of the house only gives a sanitized version of the horrific events that made the Beast House infamous. If you want the full story, you'll have to take the Midnight Tour. Saturday nights only. Limited to 13 courageous tourists. It begins on the stroke of midnight. You'll be lucky to get out alive. Well, is it any good? Briefly, yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I love this book very, very much. The actual Midnight Tour part of the story is not that important to the story. They only take the Midnight Tour right at the end of the book, and it's not all that different to anything else we've already seen in this series. The reason I say that is not to serve as a spoiler, it's just that to know what you're getting into with this. This isn't just a 540-page version of The Cellar, where it all takes place in Beast House and the usual beast shenanigans happen. This is a much richer novel. This is a very rare example of Richard Laymon caring about characterization. The first half of this book, a great deal of this novel is taken up with the story of Sandy. Sandy was the main character from the first two books, and the last we saw of her was at the end of The Beast House, the previous book, where she had to disappear because the Beast House, the novel, ended with more mass carnage. It's kind of a miracle that this thing still exists as a tourist attraction when you consider that every damn time someone goes into it, they end up getting torn apart by this monster thing. But suspend your disbelief when it comes to Laymon. And we meet Sandy right at the start, and what I love about this book is that it begins immediately after the events of The Cellar in 1980. She's breastfeeding Eric the Beast there, her child. We get to follow all the 18 years of her life from the end of The Cellar up until the present day in this one. We watch her grow as a person in some ways. And the chapters of the book that deal with Sandy, they read a little bit like Richard Laymon's short stories, but they are fun. Some of them are among the most ridiculous things he's ever written. Like there's one escapade where Sandy meets this other woman who's in an abusive relationship, and she decides to just befriend her, and then they decide to dump the corpse of the girl's boyfriend, the abusive boyfriend. Again, none of this is really spoilers because it's right at the beginning of the book. And they then come across this guy, and they end up having, not Sandy, but this girl and this guy end up having typical Laymon-esque sex in a shallow grave. It's mad. It's exactly what Laymon did sometimes, just throwing in these things which you could never possibly predict. So you've got that kind of thing going on, but you also have some really nice moments in Sandy's story. There's a section I love where she needs to make some money. She's on her own now, and she's got to care for this child beast thing she's got, and she meets this artist who makes her his muse. That was a surprisingly kind of tender moment for Laymon. I quite like that. And it's nice that Sandy has grown into this incredibly beautiful woman, and quite just a likable person, really, when you consider she wasn't really in the Beast House, the way that she blanked her mother and was just quite horrible. Here she's nice. Her character arc is a very odd one. She starts out as this delightful child, she grows into this awful teenager, and then she becomes this very nice young woman. There is a fantastic reveal in this about who Sandy is in present-day Malcassa Point, where the Beast House is. I love that detail of the novel, the reveal of it, and just who she is in the community. That was great. That's Sandy. The rest of the novel is taken up by lots of other bit characters. This is a large cast for Laymon. We get a guy called Owen and his girlfriend Monica. Owen is the typical Richard Laymon wimp character. His girlfriend is just henpecks him all the time. They're on a guided tour to Beast House because Owen is a mad fan of Beast House. Monica's complaining all the time. She doesn't want to do it. He ditches her. He strikes up a friendship with this really obnoxious character called John. Later on, he strikes up a friendship with these two crazy, crazy young women, and this all sexual stuff goes on. What I'm trying to say is that this is like if you were to take all of Laymon's novels up to this point and just put them all into a massive melting pot, stir it around a while, you'd come up with something like this. He just throws every trick of his trade at this book, and it contains some of the very, very best of Laymon, and it also contains some of the biggest of the what I've been calling the Laymonisms in a kind of pejorative way, the not so good stuff that he does, the ludicrous ways that characters behave sometimes. But I'd said at the start that I love the novel, and the reason for that is because I said in previous Beast House videos, the Beast House Chronicles are such an important series of books to me. I want to stress again and again and again that they are kind of very badly written. So don't go into these expecting, like, Stephen King levels of popular fiction writing. It's not that at all. But they're just such fun, and I loved being back in Beast House. I said that in the previous video of the Beast House novel, but I'm happy to take this tour time and again. And this time he mixes it up a bit, because it's the audio guide. So you do get to hear the original tour from Maggie Kutch on the audio version. But it's nice to be back in the rooms. It's nice to hear all the stories again, all the mythology behind Beast House. It's nice to see these new characters' reactions to it all. And that's the main reason why I love this book so much. It's a wonderful way to bring together all the elements that have made Beast House fun. I do think he was planning to write another book in the series because it very abruptly ends. It ends very similarly to how The Cellar ends. And nothing is really resolved, I have to say. This doesn't feel like the end of the series. I get the impression that he was definitely planning to carry this on. We don't get any closure on any of the characters we've come to care about. I've said this before in my Beast House review, I think, the novel, but I'm really disappointed that we don't get to find out what became of Joni from The Cellar. She's not in this one either. I was really hoping that that child from The Cellar who was horrendously sexually assaulted over and over again, that we had to read, I really wish that he would have, having put us all through that and made us read that in order to understand and get to the end of the novel, he could have respected that character a little bit and just shown us that what became of her rather than just have her disappear and act as a prop to the novel. The same with Donna, Sandy's mother. I would have loved to have known what became of her. But sadly, those two great characters just disappeared and were dropped. That's a flaw of the novel, and the novel does have many more flaws that I could talk about, but I don't want to focus on the flaws. I want to focus on what's good about it, and what is good about it is that it's a 530-page novel that I could not stop reading. And I regret very much that he did die so young, just because it's a tragedy in its own right, but because also that I wish he would have continued this. Having said that, the very fact that it ends the way it does, and it's so open-ended, allows me as a fan of this series to imagine my own ending, which I'm happy to do. I'm happy to just think up my own version of how Sandy's story would have resolved itself, where Donna is, what happened to Joni, all those things. There's something romantic in an unfinished masterpiece. Not that this is in any way a masterpiece, but you know, it's nice sometimes to imagine what could have been, rather than be told what is. So that's going to be the end of this particular review, The Midnight Tour. I strongly recommend you don't read this before reading the previous 2 volumes. It still makes sense as a standalone novel. You'll still get a lot out of it, but I don't think you'll get everything out of it that you would if you were to start from the beginning. So that's just my advice. The Midnight Tour. Thank you very much for watching this, if you did watch this far, and I'll talk to you soon with the concluding book in the Beast House Chronicles. So take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.